Hello again, and welcome to another in our continuing series of monthly Fly the Wing 5-minute flight maneuver videos. This month, we're going to talk about the maneuver you do pretty much every time you go flying, the landing. A good landing starts with a good approach, and I'm a big fan of the stabilized approach. A stabilized approach is when you maintain a constant angle glide path toward a predetermined spot on the runway. It requires constant descent airspeed and configuration. This visual point on the runway is not where we're going to land. Remember, we have to round out, flare, and bleed off airspeed before we actually touch down. But it's an aiming point that stays in the same relative position to our line of sight in the windshield all the way through base and final. Everything beyond this point seems to move up or away from us visually, and everything short of that visual point seems to move down or under us. Think of our final approach to land as a very gradually descending roller coaster track. If we were to unwind our approach from a beam touchdown all the way through the rest of downwind and the base and final legs, it would look like this from a profile or side view. A controlled, constantly descending track headed directly for that visual aiming point on the runway. We don't want it to look like this, where our descent is erratic and not smooth and consistent. This is an example of an unstabilized approach. Now, if our airplane gets above or below our desired approach glide path, we're going to use power to correct and get back on glide path. If we're too high, reduce power until we descend to glide path. If we're too low, add a little power, get back on glide path, but then neutralize that power so we don't continue to climb above glide path. During these small, slight power corrections to maintain glide path, we always want to fight to stay at the same exact final approach airspeed. If we let airspeed fluctuate, that means our pitch angle is also changed, and that's going to change the visual position of our aiming point on the windshield and adversely affect our ability to execute a stabilized approach. Remember, pitch for airspeed and power to control descent. Now, while we're doing all this on approach, maintaining our constant descent toward our aiming point on the runway, pitching for a constant airspeed, configuring the airplane for landing with flaps and landing gear, we also must fight for directional control, always keeping the longitudinal axis of the plane aligned with runway centerline. Fight to stay right on that centerline as soon as you turn final, and then all the way through the flare, touchdown, and rollout. Well, now that we've discussed the ingredients for a stabilized approach, let's go out and see if we can dial in a stabilized approach or two.
Down here at Brown Field in the pattern for 2-6 left at traffic pattern altitude 1,100 feet. We've done our gumps check, gas, undercarriage, mixture, props, switches, seat belts, fuel, all looks good. We've been cleared for a touch and go on 2-6 left, so as we get a beam our touchdown spot, we're going to bring the carb heat on and slowly bring the power back. It's a slow, constant descent on glide path, and in this airplane we want to come down for a 3-point full stall landing at 55. So as the power approaches idle, I'm continually bringing stick back pressure, slow the airplane up, then I can trim it to relieve control pressure. We want to keep 55 all the way down, and as I turn base, I'm going to look at that spot on the runway. I'm using the threshold, and I want to see it about 30 degrees below the horizon. If I can keep it at that angle all the way down, the plane's going to come down right at that spot, and then I can flare and touch down somewhere beyond that. Right now it looks pretty good. I've got the airspeed nailed. I've got a little bit of a right crosswind here on final, so I already know I'm going to probably need a little power all the way down to cushion that descent. But I'm holding airspeed. Look on final, there's no other traffic. Runway is clear. And as I make my turn to final, I want to try to roll out right on center line. Fight for that center line all the way down. A little bit of a right crosswind. It's actually shearing around a little now. It looks a little to the left. Whatever it is, when we get down here, we'll just correct for it. I'm holding that airspeed. That aiming point is still coming in. Same spot on the windshield all the way down. On short final, I'll turn carb heat off. And now I forget about the aiming point. When I'm down there at the height of a person, I just hold the airplane off and let it dissipate energy. Hold it off the runway. Directional control, stick comes back, and then there's our touchdown.
That's a quick overview of executing a stabilized approach in a single-engine light airplane. Go out and practice with your instructor, and you can read more about stabilized approaches in the blog section at flythewing.com or in Chapter 8 of the FAA's Airplane Flying Handbook. Remember, a good landing starts way back on the downwind leg, and if it ever seems to be going south on you, just power up, go around, and try to dial it in on the next approach. Have fun, fly safely, and I'll see you next month for another 5-minute Fly the Wing in-flight maneuver video.